Hello, everyone. Welcome to session two of the GM workshop that's being conducted on Desis and Dragons. I'll be a moderator for today. I'm 8-bit, pronouns he, him. And I would like to start off by saying this panel will be focused on opening the doors to the wider TTRPG space. There are a lot of great games and innovations happening in the hobby right now. And we all feel like uh, getting to know these games better will help you elevate your GMing style and experience to the next level. So we have a great list of panelists. So I would like them to introduce themselves. We'll start with Emma.
Oh, wow. Making me go first. So much pressure. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma. My pronouns are she, her. I'm very happy to be here. I'm a new GM myself, having played several different ones. Started with D&D. Took me 2 years to learn all the rules, the ins and outs, that kind of thing. And I've started to broaden my horizons, try out several new ones. My I would say favorite at the moment that a little underrated is by Nerdburger Games. It's called Die Laughing. I'll talk a little bit about it more, but basically you're in a horror movie RPG, but funny. Um, and yeah, I'll talk about that a little more, but I think that is my favorite at the
Nice. I'd love to hear more about that. Sounds amazing. Tree, why don't you go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Sri. I live in South India. I use kind of all pronouns. I've been running and playing games for 2 or 3 years now. I think the kind of tough to say, but I think at the moment the game that I think is underrated or that I think more people should try and play is Fiasco, which is it's a game that tries to simulate the feeling of being in a Coen Brothers film, where things go wrong, truly wild shit happens, and everyone gets to do the things that are bad because that's what happens in a Coen Brothers film. And I'm looking forward to the session. Thanks for having me on.
Perfect. That sounds like beautiful chaos. Next, we have Ari.
Hello. I'm Ari. I've been GMing for around 4 years. By next month, it will be 4 years. I started with D&D, and then once I found online spaces, I just started playing new systems and got into TTRPG design after that. And I've been making a few games here and there. Uh, Overall, I just like to play new systems and uh, mechanics are a little bit wacky, but my favorite game as of late has been The Quiet Year. I love world building so much. I love making lore. And The Quiet Year is just an amazing game to just build up a world, build up a place, and make it your own. And it comes with such an amazing ending as well, which I don't want to spoil, but I genuinely love games like that. So super excited to be here. Amazing to talk to all of you. Thank you.
Yeah, Quiet Year sounds wonderful. I have to play that soon. Next, we have Chirag.
Hi, I'm Chirag. I'm one of the founders of Desis&Dragons. I've run games sometimes on the stream, and I've been playing D&D since about 13. And I spent most of my time learning new systems instead of making friends, which has really worked out great for me. I didn't think it would. And one of the unappreciated systems that I think used to be very big back in 2017, but I think needs more attention is Fate, like all the different permeations of Fate. Like we're using Fate Accelerated in the stream Blades of the Yanta, or a mecha game, but I think that Fate's such a great system because you can do so much with it, and it's not about skills or classes. It's about the aspects, the parts of your character which are really important to you, and I think that's like really helps me understand, like, got me into the role playing aspect as opposed to like the point by aspect of role playing. So it was really helpful for me as becoming a GM, and I'm really excited for this. Thanks for having me.
Great. Don't forget to check out our stream on Twitch, Blades of Yanta. It's an amazing campaign.
Mhm.
Next, we have Jess.
Hey, I'm Jess. My pronouns are she, her. And I write games, I stream games. I has started with playing Tunnels and Trolls and then D&D, I think. Might have been Palladium before that. My GM is very old school in my home games. And I wanted to try and GM something not very complicated. So I picked up Mouse Guard, and that was incredibly complicated. Uh, and I just never looked back. System I think is unappreciated is the D20 roll under system that Simbarum uses, because if you've ever watched any of my streams, you know that I am terrible at math. So I like just having a target number and you know on the die whether you've rolled it or not. And yeah, Simbarum is great for that. Oh, and
Perfect.
a
I've heard
game that I really love is Wise Women, where you are just village witches, like in Poland, doing a not real herbal magic, but you learn about actual herbs and the way that they're used in herbalism back in the Middle Ages, I believe, and you form a little coven together to help or harm your community. It's cool.
those games sound wonderful. And that brings us to like the elephant in the room. We a lot of people in the hobby already have some experience with certain TTRPGs, whether it be D&D or Pathfinder. Why should we invest our time into learning other systems? That is the question that we get faced most often when we try to suggest new systems to people in the hobby. So I'll ask this question to Emma to start off. Emma, what do you think? Um, what do you say to people who are like, I already know a system, why should I try something else?
Um, so I think it's a multifaceted. I know how difficult when you think of TTRPG, you have your big ones, Pathfinder, those kind of. But there are so many other games that are simpler that push you in terms of improvisation and expression, that isn't so limited by a rule set or a skills check. I think it's really important for GMs and players to broaden their horizons so that the game they play the most can be enhanced. So when I started playing D&D, I started playing with a table of people who had never played before. Our DM was brand new. All of us as players were brand new, and it was kind of chaotic and kind of a mess, if I'm being honest. But I will cherish that experience for a really long time because it took me several years to actually say, okay, I want a GM. And that was after having that not so great D&D experience and then moving into playtesting some other TTRPGs in development. So one of them is called Gablonia. It just came out. The name of the creator is escaping me right now, but it has its own world created, so it's very D&D adjacent. But instead, you're just goblins living in a world, and you utilize D6s to do your skill checks and trait checks. So it's way less complicated. There are a ton of others out there that simplify your, and I think that gets people into TTRPGs to where they feel more confident in saying, I want to do this, rather than having to face a die check. I think it's more fun when less on you player, and you can just tell a story and not have to worry about breaking a rule. I say that in quotes, because a good GM should also be able to let players do whatever they want. And I think some TTRPGs allow that better than.
Definitely. A lot of fiction first games like Blades in the Dark, PBTA, Apocalypse World, they all encourage this sort of role playing where you are allowed to do whatever you want as long as it fits the fiction, and the rules are just there to support you. I think like you are a resident Blades fan. How has Blades helped, or like any other fiction first games, helped elevate your GMing style?
I think what is most important for me, and like what is most fun for me with that style of game, is learning how to hold on lightly. And that's what I try and tell players when I try and bring them into the game, and it's what I try and learn about the game when I'm reading it, is when to take an idea or a plan that I had and see that the players have made something completely different out of it, and then abandon or change what I thought was going to happen. And I think that's something that a certain style of fiction first game, I would not necessarily say all of them, but the style of fiction first game which allows that to happen. And like usually in the rule book, you get some really good advice about how to make that happen. That is, I think, what really helps. And I think especially in a game like Blades in the Dark, you have lots of opportunities to kind of like let a player tell you something about the world as a GM, and then just run with it, rather than thinking to yourself, oh no, I thought that this NPC was going to be a certain kind of way, and these roles or these ways of playing don't really let me kind of like be so rigid about that, right? And I think it's not necessarily an easy skill to learn. I think holding on lightly, both as a player and as a GM, can be very tough. It's something that I'm still learning, which is why when I go into new games, I'm always interested to see what those games have to say about that.
Definitely. Would anyone else like to join in on this? Because it's a very interesting topic where certain systems favor uh, can help you role play better in other ways. So, yeah, Chirag, you wanted to jump in?
Uh, yeah, I guess like there's some systems which like as like the fiction first. When you're looking at the system, it's very nice to see which are the points that are highlighted in the system, which way they encourage. For example, Masks, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game. If you notice, even though it's a game where you're superheroes, you get into fights, there's no tracking for HP. There's no room for like if you're injured, if you've broken an arm, that's not there. That's all in the fiction, which highlights that the important thing here is not if someone gets hurt, as opposed to like D&D, where like that's what they track. They don't track emotional states or things like that, really, except for the fighting condition. They track, how hurt are you physically? Well, in something like Masked, it tells the GM and the player, the MC and the player, oh, what matters to me is the emotional state. What matters to me is I should be leaving myself open to being hurt emotionally. I should be targeting the players' like emotions, trying to get things to feel that way, which tells you like how you should play in the game. Those are like pretty important. Those elements makes you think like different games will be targeting different things. Like what are the important things? Like something that might be supply, resources, money is the most important thing. Others, it could be, again, emotions, could be being turned on if you're playing Monster Hearts. It's all manner of. So like that's like an interesting reason why to try something else. So you're like, what are the important parts of the game? And it helps you examine what are like the hidden stuff in your favorite games. Like what is the kind of game, what are the kind of choke points, target points that D&D is doing, for example, or Savage World or GURPS or whatever that is trying to target. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Different games can target different experiences, different genres differently.
Exactly.
And yeah, that's a great point right there.
Mm-hmm.
Jess and Ari, you have developed for games, and obviously that means that you have already read a lot of games as well. Has that helped you in like your GMing and in the game design space?
Oh my gosh, so much. Like, the more games you read, even if you don't get to play them, the more you learn about other mechanics. And also, it's not just seeing what other people are doing. I know some people like to view what other creators are making as like the competition, which I is a viewpoint that I understand but don't endorse. I just think there's such a wealth of cool ideas out there, and I want to see what other cool things are being made. And some of those you can pull and integrate into your games, whether you're designing them or just running them at the table. Like, because sometimes you might be doing an adventure and realize, oh, this adventure is really time sensitive, and I need a way to do that. Well, if you're at your home table, maybe you'll pull out like a sand timer or just set like an alarm on your phone. But if you're playing online, the way a lot of us are nowadays, a great way to do that is just the clock from Blades in the Dark. Every time they fail a roll or something big happens, tick off a thing on the clock, and that's how you're tracking time.
Here.
That clocks and blades in the dark. My God, is there anything more useful? It's the perfect mechanic.
It is an amazing mechanic from Blades in the Dark. I also like the flashbacks in Blades in the Dark.
So
One of the one of the other moves that I've used was the Zenith moves from Heart. I took it for our Monster Hearts game and made like final moves for everyone, so they die, but they still get to do something amazing at the end, which was like an amazing concept for me as a GM to take. So yeah, you don't have to restrict your rules to like one system. You can just steal whatever you want. Just put it in your game. Who knows? I mean, nobody's gonna find out unless they read the other systems.
yeah, what are they going to do? Send
Warhammer.
a system of police?
Exactly.
System police.
Yeah,
I think it also.
fantasy. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Jess. It's fine.
I was just gonna say Warhammer Fantasy does some fun stuff with that too, where you have like fate and how you can spend your fate points as like a I'm about to die, but let me do one cool thing before I go. Which is pretty neat. So you can like save your friends as you die.
Yeah, it also brings forth like an amazing narrative and also like role playing opportunities that maybe it's not present in that system. Maybe you just wanted to explore something. It's still fun to bring some other mechanic and fit it into your own games. Am I
I
using?
realize that's not
yeah.
entirely how fate points are used, and Cubicle 7's going to yell at me because I write for that. That's one way and a common house rule for fate points. So that's not the main way, but it's my favorite.
I also think that reading new rules and trying them out pushes you out of your comfort zone. I know me personally, and why it took me so long to start DMing, because I was so caught up in like, I'm going to do something wrong. I'm going to break, and that's going to ruin it for everybody. And playing other TTRPG that were more, I guess, as a player, were more GM light. So Good Strong Hands is one that I really enjoy. It was nominated for 2 Ennies this past year in the Best Rules and Best Family Game category. It just uses D6s, and the GM is basically there to help the players. And the rules are so like, I wouldn't say wishy-washy, but they're very open-ended. And I think it pushes both players and GM out of the comfort zone because it's basically, well, what can I do? You can do anything. And I think that has helped me in my GMing to be more open to allow my players to do whatever they want within reason, obviously, because you're still trying to tell a story, but you also have to give player agency to try new things, push the limits, see what kind of cool character moments and narrative plot points have that just come from a random role play moment. And I don't think I would have gotten there without having read or played other games, just because my mindset before was so caught up in the rules. Oh, when you want to do something, you roll a dice. So I'd also improve my improv skills, which are just great in everyday life, not just at a table.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add one thing there, which was that the reason that I remembered Die was that I don't think it's there anymore, but in one of the earlier playtests in Die, it said that one player character rolls a d6 and they can choose to replace one face of the die with a 6, right? And
So how it is now, because I just played it, is you draw a color on the. Are you talking about the Fool character, right?
yeah, correct.
Okay, so you draw on the d6 and you roll an extra d6, and when you draw a circle on it, and when the circle comes up, you succeed in like an especially weird way.
Right.
But once that happens, you have to erase your circles and draw an X, and then something horrific goes wrong.
Excellent. Yeah.
And each character class has a different funky mechanic. So one of them, like, their emotions control how powerful they are, and then another one has like the voice that like the in Dune, the Bene Gesserit have, and can control other players and NPCs. Die is fun and funky and weird.
So
yeah,
good.
and I think it's that when I read Die, I thought, okay, these are the kinds of things that are permitted. You can do these. You can just do these things. Right? Nobody is stopping you from completely playing, like changing and playing with things that normally you would imagine are immutable. And I think that really helps when you think of like learning a new game or trying to get someone new into a system where you tell them, well, this thing that you thought you couldn't change, it turns out you can do whatever you like with that.
100%. That brings a lot of freedom. Like, from this discussion, what I've learned is uh, playing new games helps elevate your own GMing experience. Even if it's like just reading other systems, you can bring that knowledge and mechanics into your own home games and really have fun. And another thing is like you certain games like support what you want to do better. Like for in my example, I really don't like prepping. Like prepping is like in my for me is kind of stressful. So I just play games that don't require prepping. Like the critically acclaimed game Wander Home, which you all should try, and it's an amazing bit. From here, let's move on to another topic, which is like very important in the hobby space right now, and that is seeing more diversity and representation in our games, especially since a lot of the games that dominate the hobby right now are Eurocentric and have not been have been like written from a point of view which not a lot of people might be able to appreciate. So I would like to ask Jess this because she has worked on a very beautiful product called Uncaged Goddesses. We'll drop links to all of this later, but it's a great book, and it focuses on uh, goddesses and has a lot of great representation. So just take it away. Why do you think that's important?
Ooh, it's I have a twofold answer to this. So I think it's important for any game, and really any business or thing ever. But it was particularly important for us in Uncaged Goddesses because, like you said, fantasy and tabletop stuff has been so predominantly Eurocentric. And what Ashley Warren, who conceived of the original Uncaged series, Uncaged Goddesses is the final book in a series. And we had a new team. I was the writing director of it. Gwen Bassett and David Markuski were the producers. But what we wanted to do was what Ashley had begun and bring in diverse voices for an anthology. Because when you do that, you get to tell so many different types of stories. Uncaged was initially flipping tales of female monsters and exposing those tropes and giving them greater agency. We were doing that with the D&D neutral and evil goddesses. So it was less let's bring in like let's do the Kumiho and La Llorona and have like different uh, world monsters, because this was very specific to the D&D pantheon. However, because we brought in writers and artists from all over the world, they had such cool takes that were things that we never would have thought of, and that the original writers at Wizards and before that TSR hadn't thought of, because when you get in your viewpoint, the same bubble, it is hard to see outside of that if you're always exposed to the same things, right? So bringing in new voices, new cultures, and people with different experiences than you brings new things to the table. And also, they're able to point out things that so many problematic and upsetting things happen in games because people have a narrow viewpoint. They might not realize that something is a problem. When someone with a different perspective, maybe someone who's queer, maybe someone who's a woman, maybe someone who is a different race than the original writer might be like, hey, that's actually, that might not be a slur in America, but that's a slur over here in Japan. So maybe don't use that phrasing or something like that. And yeah, that was a big conglomeration of words. Oh, sorry, but I have so many thoughts that I'm just spewing out at you. But yeah, it's a way to get a lot of cool voices and new ideas. Is the TLDR there?
Perfect. We here on like Daisies and Dragons, safety, inclusion, representation has been one of the more one of our priorities on the server. I think that can be reflected in our current stream campaign, Games of Yanta, which Chirag can shed some light on. Uh, you have set the game in India 1974, I think.
Correct. Yeah.
And yeah, how did you manage to approach this?
Well, for me, I've always liked Power Rangers, and I grew up with. Like, that's my kind of thing that I really liked. And the setting I chose, Mecha vs Kaiju, is one that I knew from Fate. So I'm like, okay, that's Fate. I'm comfortable with that. With that, when I was looking through for the setting, I was like, in none of the books for this do they mention India. And I even spoke to the creator, why haven't you done this? Like, well, I don't know that area quite well. And like, I didn't want to like mess things up. And I was like, there's such an interesting alternate history, and like India is being ignored. Like, it's like something India's getting ignored by lots of role playing systems. I was like, well, I should put my money where my mouth is and actually try and see, could I write a setting that's in that thing, and also write a setting like what would be an interesting setting would be the 70s. What were exciting things happening in the 70s? And I was like, that's an area of India that like the world doesn't really see. And there's lots of Indian people, I presume, who like Voltron, Power Rangers, all those kind of things. I managed to find 5 of them to play with me, so that's a wonder. That's at least 5 people who are up for that. And so I wanted to do that. It was like my main thing. Like, I wanted to have that bit of like that bit of India, show that a little bit of India, combine it with something I loved, and get the option to research it, because I was researching that period to try and understand how it felt back in. I grew to appreciate that part of India, which I don't know, because I grew up in England and we didn't study Indian history, and I felt left out. But now I felt like I understand just a little bit more. It was a real labor of love to really kind of do it, because I wanted to like do it in this kind of time period. I wanted to like figure out how to do it and how to combine all these weird and wonderful bits, because these are all weird, wonderful bits of me. The Indian, the Power Rangers fan, the nerd, it's all bits of me, and I wanted to showcase it with other Indian nerds. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. I'd like to open this topic to the rest of the panelists. Yeah, go ahead, Ari.
Yeah, I just wanted to expand on what Chirag said. It's not you said you grew up outside and like that made you miss this, but I grew up here in India and I still get incredibly surprised by the amazing amount of takes we have. Like every single time I play with a new table, everyone comes up with a different idea, because like we have so many people, we have so many states, we have so many cultures, castes, whatever. And every single person has a different perspective. Like I've been surprised every single game. And there are many Indias. Like it's not one India, there's no one representation for India. And every time someone comes up with a new take, like when I saw the world building you did for Yanta, I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. I would have never come up with this. This is something new, but it's also something very, very familiar. And that's an amazing place to be. Like just at the table, like going, yeah, I can relate with this, but this is new and I'm loving this. It's like such a great place to be as a GM. Like, I would recommend that for everyone, honestly.
Yeah, I was really lucky with my players because not only was I lucky to get a bunch of daisies. It's always fun playing with daisies, but they were from all over the place. We have daisies from Canada, we have daisies from here, from there, from all over the place. And I'm going to pull them out, call them out. Craig, bringing his Chennai character, Otto, and he's just really just like having that element. And I could hear Matrix like, oh, this feels like home. This like feels like people I've met, and just like seeing that kind of like authenticity you might not see in another stream, another group of people, just like people bringing things that are real, things that matter, like into this. It's a sci-fi. It's a little bit silly. You're in giant robots, but it's just that little bit of real, just makes that game, much more exciting, much more. I don't want to say it because it's like a thing, but it had spice. So that's a spice to it that you can't. Yeah, and so that's it's a lot of fun. Play with different people. Play with as many different people as you can from all different places because it just enhances the flavor. So many food things. Why am I making people?
Are you hungry? I mean, that would be why you're talking about food, right? But
TTRPG, fill me up. Nothing else.
to add to that, I think it's also really important for not just the GM players to be able to see themselves in whatever setting or character or playbook. In some language would be a playbook for types of character sheets. Because if they can see themselves in it, they're more invested. One of my players at my D table has never played a TTRPG before, and fantasy really isn't their cup of tea. So we had lots of really long discussions about how, in terms of diversity, it's diversity in thought and expression. Like there's lots of different things that go into diversity. I think it is so important that everybody feels included. And so the way we ended up building their character, I was like, okay, so tell me a character that you're inspired by, that you would really want to maybe see if you can find things similar to that. And they chose Mulan. And so their character is male expressing for some reasons that are secret to the table that I don't want to give away. But it was very cool for me to speak with somebody who is not into fantasy a whole lot, but is willing to jump in head first because they can find something about the character and the backstory, and working with me as their GM to pull together something they can get excited about. And I think that's what is most important, at least in my opinion, that whoever picks up the TTRPG should be able to find something they get excited about. And for the most part, if you can find something you relate to, then you can find a reason to want to play.
Yeah, I also want to add to kind of the opposite of that, which is that, and Avery Aldous does this very, very well in Monster Hearts 2 when she talks about, in fact, actually, this section is not written by her, which is a credit to her. It's written by three people whose names I am going to butcher now, C.L. Sainte-Marie, James Mendes Hodes, and Jian Shim, who all talk about the way that you can choose to portray race or portray diversity in at your table. And I think something that can be very tricky is that these things do have the ability and the potential to cause unintended harm. And I think it's quite important to keep in mind that trying something new, putting that diversity in, and maybe you'll make a mistake, maybe you'll fuck up. But doing that is still better, I think, than kind of like choosing not to be diverse and speaking only to the experience that you think you have, because you're afraid of making that mistake. And I think that's quite important also now, because we use safety tools, and we use as best as we are able the ability to talk to each other and communicate about what could hurt us. But sometimes things happen at the table that we don't know will hurt us until they happen, right? And I think it's a very brave choice to explore that, and it's a very brave choice to risk that. And I think we should know that is in fact a good thing to try that if you feel able to do that, because Otherwise, you end up in a space where maybe there's not enough diversity because you're just very cautious about exploring this kind of thing.
Yeah. I remember like when I was first doing Pathfinder Society, there was like only what's it called? Pre-gens. And just one character just immediately grabbed me, like it was a monk, because I noticed him because he had an Indian name and he had he was like an Indian kind of character, and he's like from that part of Pathfinder that's like inspired by India that they will never explore, they will never expand upon. I keep looking, everything else has a book about it, but that region doesn't. But it's like I saw that and it really resonated. It was like, oh, this feels like me. And immediately, even though monks, it's tough to play a monk very well in Pathfinder, I really, I held on to that guy. He was my longest lasting Pathfinder character in Pathfinder Society. And just like trying to find that character that resonates with you. And like that's maybe been like for a reason why I was playing half-orcs for a long time, because it resonated with the idea of like someone who was torn between two different places who didn't quite feel that they fit in. Not that I feel that I'm particularly orcish, I don't got the muscles for it. But it's like, that's what I was like doing role playing in England. It's like no one else was doing it. So it's like, finding something that kind of resonated, in two very different ways. One being, oh, this person actually has an Indian name that speaks to me. And then also having that kind of like, oh, this feeling, this kind of like, I can bring emotional truth to that. It resonates with me, So it's like, it's really helpful when you see that in games, whether it's like as a class or a pre-gen option or just having that there, that kind of representation. I never realized how much it mattered to me until like years later.
For me, funnily enough, that spark was from Desis. It was from our masks that Shiva runs with Purva. I mean, I had a home game. I had D&D that I played with my cousins and everything, but the first time I felt insanely at home while playing a game was when I was playing with Shiva, when I was playing in like the Mumbai version of Masks and like all the superheroes who had all these Indian names, and I was like, holy shit, this is what it feels like when you're white and you watch Avengers, basically. Like, yeah, this is what I want. Was like such a, how do I put this? It was such a spark. It lit such a fire. Like I was like, hell yeah, I want this for every single game I play.
That's beautiful. A lot of like Chirag said, add some spice. The world is a melting pot. If you only eat pizza, then you'll never experience biryani, and biryani is overrated. So try other things as well.
Beg your pardon?
Yes, I stand with this statement,
Wow.
and because I'm the moderator, that will stand.
Don't you dare mute me as I talk about you dad mounting.
Great. See, this is the fire. Like all Indians love biryani except me. So, uh, put biryani in your games. Put other food. I'm getting out of topic. Let's come back. Representation is important. Add things that help you expand your horizons and seek products that help you do that, and you'll have a great time. I think that is the thing that we got away from that topic. Moving on to the next topic. We've talked about a lot of amazing games here. But how do you choose a system that you want to play? Like there are so many options out there. Chirag, how do you do it?
And another bit. Oh, we're doing this? Okay. Yeah. So when it comes to like picking a system, I'm a very simple man. There's not the biggest sophisticated answer. Usually it's like I've seen something on TV and I'm just like thinking, how do I do that? Because I don't think D&D will do that. What system will let me do that? Oh, I remember it was, for example, Danganronpa, which is a video game visual novel where you're kind of like investigating. It's a murder mystery version of Hunger Games, essentially, or where you're just trying to like these kids are all killing each other, and you're a detective trying to figure out why they're doing it. I'm like, how would I do this in a game? So often it's like going on Google and trying to figure out what systems kind of work, what systems can bring that kind of feeling to me, that can like bring that out. But another way it happens is it'll be like I just like hear about a system and I'm like, what can I do with this system? Can this system do something interesting? Like I hear someone talk about it on like the forums or like someone bring it up. I'm like, what? I'll see it and immediately makes me inspire new games, like Animon Story, which I saw it is basically, hey, you want to play Digimon? Do you want to have Digimon? I'm like, yes. Why did I not realize I wanted to play Digimon until I saw this game existed on Twitter? So it's like I'm always watching and looking, but often it is like I'm finding a gap in the story I'm telling. Like I'm like, or in the system I'm using. I'm like, I want to do a sci-fi game, but I'm like, I could push D&D to do it, but often it's like I want to find a system that can do it, like is made for that kind of thing. So trying to like, that's what I'm trying to look for new systems. When I'm trying to be like, what kind of game do I want to play? I do have like, and I'm sure other people do, standby games, like some generic games that can do a lot of different things. It used to be Hero System, which could, it's point buy. So like GURPS, it can run different systems. But then my more recent one is Fate, which again, it can do basically any genre. So often it'll be, can I do it with something I'm comfortable with? Is it a bit weird? I might do Fate. But if there's also a system that does it specifically, like I could make up a Digimon mechanics, but if someone's already doing that and I look out and I find them, like, yes, let's do that. And then I play with that and I fall in love with that. And so I just like see which ones work and which one feels like too much effort or too much investment to not get the same returns. Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to play systems, that I can get. Because I am the DM, I will most likely have to like explain it to other people. I'll have to understand it. So like if a game's really great, I will take the effort to learn and do it. But often I'll find I can, an old fallback can work. So it is always like a balancing act of trying something new or like doing something else. Or sometimes I'll just read the story for something like Shadowrun. I'm like, this is great. I don't like the system. I'm going to take the story of Shadowrun and run it with something else. So it does kind of depend. I feel that wasn't a helpful answer. I'm sorry.
That's fine. I learned a lot. So next we'll be moving on to once you have a system that you've chosen, how do you? What's your approach to learning these rules and mechanics? This is open to the whole panel.
Well, if I can just quickly jump in here, I think one of the things that came up earlier, which is about clocks and blades in the dark and flashbacks, is also kind of relevant here, which is that when I read games now, I think to myself, what kinds of things are happening in this game? How do I help them happen? And how do I make sure my players enjoy those things like happening, right? And I think clocks and flashbacks, when I read them in the book Blades in the Dark, they really helped me understand how it makes the game flow and how, we're a crew of people going on a heist. And so flashbacks help you like carry out that fantasy. I think that really helped me kind of get the game. And in a similar way, when I learn the rules of a game that I haven't yet played, I try and look at, okay, if this move were to happen in the game, or if this role occurred, what would success and failure look like, and how does that help the game seem fun, right? And if I'm able to understand that, then I find that actually learning the rules becomes much easier, because then I know what about this rule is fun and why I want to engage in it.
Definitely.
As for your question about, do you want to ask about like how do we get the players to try it out? How to get your players on board? Is that the question we're doing?
I think it's learning rules and mechanics.
Yeah, like,
sorry, I'll shut
does
up.
anyone want to chime in on that? Like, how do you learn these rules and mechanics for different systems?
Yeah, I really like looking at the character sheet
Mhm.
because for me, I mean, when they have one, like sometimes if you're playing something like Alice is Missing, your characters all function the same and you don't really know what your character is doing until right before play. But for me, if there are character sheets, a lot of times like having one in front of me to reference while I'm reading the rules is so helpful, especially with crunchier games. If you are playing something like gonna go back to Cubicle 7 again because that's the crunchiest game that I write for. But if you're playing something like Soulbound, or I don't think we've talked about Mouse Ritter yet. If you're playing something like Mouse Ritter, I want to look at the character sheet. And if I am reading the book and looking at the character sheet, when there is one, if I still can't figure out how it works, that's probably a game that I'm not going to run. I might play in it and hope that a GM can teach it to me, but I'm not going to run it because I can't teach it to somebody else.
Yeah, I'm the same way. There are games, so like I mentioned Die Laughing earlier. When I learned it, I read the rules and looked at it, and it's so simple when you can just map, oh, here's a rule, this is how it applies to the character. And I always try to, when I'm reading rules, look at it from a player's and try to see, okay, if I were teaching this to somebody or I were playing it for the first time, would I be able to understand it with or without a G? One thing I keep mentioning Die Laughing, but I think it is so good for folks who want to try GMing without having to run a whole game. So I'll say the premise again, like you're in a horror movie. Everybody plays a horror movie trope. You randomly roll for your location and monster, and then you essentially, each person gets a chance to direct it or GM a scene. They pick and choose who is involved in it. And then when that scene is over and you do a couple of skills checks with D6s, you pass the book, and the next person is the director. I literally played it around a campfire with friends. It's set up that way so that everybody gets a chance to put their own spin on it because the rules are so simple and written in a way that anybody with or without GM experience pick it up and try it and see if they're good at or enjoy setting up a scene. So I like that one because of its simplicity, reach to all people. You can try to be a GM if you want for one scene within the acts of. So yeah,
Nice.
I hope that's interesting.
Yeah, no, that's good. One thing that I really like that I find I can't really play a game without is I need examples of play in the book. Like I need them to show like people playing the game so I can get a vibe of how it's supposed to work. Like Scum and Villainy is very good because it's got all these different examples of play dotted throughout the book. Like how does a heist work? How does this work? How do the rules work with the fiction? And so like if it doesn't have an example of play, I get very nervous because I'm like, how does it all work? And often I'll go to the example of play first before I start reading the rules. I'm like, okay, so this is kind of how the game works. And then I'll go to, so what does that mean? What do all these things mean? So if it doesn't have an example play, I'm like, okay, I don't know how this game is supposed to function. And so that's why I'm a little envious of like in Japan, their TTRPG culture is different. They're obsessed with like reading actual plays. They like write down transcripts of actual plays and have like different systems, and even some of those turn into anime or whatever. But just like having like that there that you can literally read someone's actual play, see how they did it with the mechanics in there, like, oh, we're describing the thing, but also what mechanics are rolled is like such a great learning experience. Like they have it in the new Konosuba TTRPG. And it's just like, this really helps me understand this. And then I can read the rules like, okay, so I have examples, I have things to fall back. I know what these playbooks mean, I know what these classes mean, all that kind of stuff. So that's how I learn, I read like a nerd.
Yeah, transcripts are an amazing way to learn, but also just playing the game is also a fun way to learn because honestly, I tried to learn Blades in the Dark by reading the rules, and I just gave up after a while and asked Tree to run a game for me, and I learned so much more when I was playing with Tree. Like just playing with someone who actually knows the system is like also like a valid way to learn a system. Transcripts are great. Just reading the rules is also great. Another fun way I've found learning a game is like looking at the Roll20 character sheets. They tell you exactly what needs to be chosen. So it's helped me a lot just going through like Roll20 stuff um, to pick like, okay, if I make this character, I have these choices. Okay, I got it now.
Perfect. I think this answers your question, Lennox's. Next, like we know the system now. How do you get players on board? Ari, I think you want to take the lead on this. And also to add to this, I would like to. That's a question from Legolas, which is, uh, what are other systems to best get players out of the D&D bubble, but are similar enough to its mechanics and fantasy settings to make them feel somewhat at home.
Okay, so when I first started asking people to play with me, the thing that helped me the most was just being insanely enthusiastic about my own game. Like I made this 400 or 500 words of lore, and I just started bothering people to like read this, look at this, I made this, and I love the system, I love this game. It was for our Monster Hearts game, and like I think a few people understood like I was super interested, and everyone got excited. Like I wasn't even there for the first session because I had to go work, and the session zero was done without the GM. 8-Bit was there. He was one of the players, and it was just everyone got so enthusiastic with the game. We had an entire campaign, and it was amazing. Like I think just your enthusiasm is like one of the best ways to get people to play with you. And the second one would be just to tell people what the game is. Like, yeah, D&D has, you know, fantasy. Do you like fantasy? Do you want to try a different kind of fantasy? Maybe you'd like Dungeon World. Maybe you like Spelljammer. Why don't you try Expanse? It's you still have to find a way to relate to your players and get excited about those players, what they like as well. Honestly, like the enthusiasm is like the fastest way to get people to play with you, really.
Speaking of enthusiasm,
Hmm.
have you guys heard of Wanderlore?
Yeah. If one thing I found to get people enthusiastic about games like Wander Home, which is a fantastic, is a trick I learned from DM Sam from Panic Knot. He told me that if you want people to like play the game, you need to make a pitch document. Write a pitch and like how to get people. That's what I use for like a bunch of my games, and that's what I use for Mecha vs Kaiju. And I can share the example, like what I actually pitched to the players. It's a one pager. If I can share it in chat, is that okay? 8-Bit?
Sure.
Are you sad I'm not talking about Wonder Home?
Very sad, but go ahead.
So yeah, that one is just like to get people excited. Instead of going into like rules, my main thing is I stretch the inspiration. Like, what are the media that really inspires? Like this one, Pacific Rim, Power Rangers, and also like Indian example, like Rocket Boys, Brahmastra, the new movie that's supposed to come out. And then like a little bit of a premise. So if I can like sum it up in about a paragraph, and then like how long the campaign's going to work, and any special rules I might have. Like, if I was doing D&D, what classes are not allowed or what races are encouraged. I did one for that was inspired by Legend of Korra and like other kind of thing, just to get people in the right headspace. So like, this is the kind of game we're playing. And then the bottom line, like, this is the system we're doing. Like, let them know what the system is, but I want to sell them on the process. And, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So like, they see this, they understand like, hey, this is the kind of game we're playing. And they'll be like, okay, I know what some of this is. This sounds interesting. This is like a nice variety of things. It gets me, especially if you're doing like combining different stuff. Like it's cowboys, but on the moon, or it's just like it's Predator, but in the ancient past, and just like you help people get that mindset together. So it's just like media exists. Let's use it and just
I agree 100%. At Gen Con, I was working Nerdburger to help at their table and things like that, and it was very easy to get people interested in one of his games called Capers. And I'm just going to read you the tagline: "Superpowered gangsters in the Roaring 20s."
Wow.
Right? Like they're like, "Wow, I really want to play that." And it's so fun. And there's several like other supplemental books that are out for it and things of that. So Craig, who owns and runs Nerdburger, these are all his brainchildren. But Capers is real fun. You only need a deck of cards, 2 cards with with 2 jokers, and you flip cards over for your success or failure. And I think getting players excited, part of it, some people don't have access to lots of dice or other supplemental objects that you might need to play. Now online, you have those online things, but most everybody has a deck of cards, maybe a D6 at home. those things make it more accessible as well. So on top of enthusiasm, I think if you say you don't need to buy anything extra, or it uses a deck of cards, something they're familiar with, that makes it less daunting and more attractive. It's like, oh, I don't need to learn what new thing is called. I know, okay, with capers, I just need a deck of cards. I have a deck of cards. I've played blackjack or poker or euchre if you're from the Midwest in the United States. Those kind of things.
Oh,
Yeah. So I think it's about access. I think enthusiasm is so important if you're going to run a building off of what Ari said earlier. That's how I got a lot of players at my table. People who've never played D&D before wanted to play because I was excited about the story that I wanted to tell. And learning the rules comes with that. But, I think your enthusiasm, showing how easy it is to transition, makes it easier for a player to not feel so.
Perfect. And I think, we're running out of time. So I'll quickly move on to the last topic that we have today. That is, suppose you do not have players, and this is a big, big problem for new GMs. Suppose you do not have players. What options do you have? There are solo TTRPGs, and there's also the idea that reading books is just as valid as play. I would like Tree to approach this.
Yeah, sure. So I think if I can veer into pretentiousness just for a little bit, there's a very good book called What We See When We Read, by an author who I will tell you the name of, Peter Mendelsohn. And in it, he describes this feeling of reading something, closing the book, looking up, and then just thinking about what you've just read, and then looking down and opening the book and reading. And he says, you're still reading. You haven't stopped reading just because you've closed the book, right? And I think the reason that that's really useful to think about in terms of playing is that I don't think it's the case that if I'm reading a game that I'm excited by and I'm thinking and I'm imagining about if I'm imagining the things that I could do, the things that this game could help me play, then I think that I am to some extent playing, right? And I think that something that's really useful to understand is that you're not it can feel a little bit lonely or a little bit sad that I'm just sitting here reading this book and thinking about this and not playing it with the table as intended. But the vast majority of games that I have read, I have not played, right? I haven't read Worldwide Wrestling RPG, though it seems very good, right? I haven't played it. I have read it. I haven't played Starforged, but I hear it's very good, right? And I think it can be really useful to know that when you read a game, even if you haven't brought it to a table yet, just by reading it, you have actually kind of engaged in the fantasy of what would happen if I use these rules to tell a story. And that's really a game, what a game is, right? Whether it's got loads of rules or very few rules. And I think that because of that, when I read a game and I haven't played it, but I'm enjoying it, I think to myself, maybe in the next game that I do play, I'll bring some of this energy with me. So these games go with me wherever I go. And Blades in the Dark goes with me wherever I go. And it's genuinely my favorite game of all time. So I think even if I'm reading Blades in the Dark and I'm not in a campaign at the moment, I'm still playing it because I'm enjoying that feeling and I'm thinking about the kinds of things the game can help me do.
Exactly. Things just live rent free in your head, like Wonderform. And with that, I like closing statements from everyone. Just any socials you want to shout out, any products you want to shout out, and just end with what is that one your favorite game that just lives rent free in your head. You all know what mine is. I want to hear what's yours. Emma, why don't we start with you?
I think we can see in chat that this has been such a good discussion. And I am so grateful that I was selected to join this amazing group of people to talk about game accessibility and learning new systems and new rules, and really hoping that folks who are listening understand that running games isn't, yes, it's scary to take the leap, but once you get into it, it's so fun. because really we're all storytellers today. We are immersing players and ourselves in a world that we either create or we're inspired by based on whatever product game we are using. I am so excited to broaden my DMing skills. I think I'm the least experienced. I've been DMing less than a year at this point, but I pride myself on my ability to tell stories and help authors find stories. I edit TTRPGs on the side and help their stories come to life with my I guess additions and pointing out where there might be a plot hole or something like that. So I'm grateful to have been a part of this discussion today, and I look forward to either running or playing games with all of you at some point. I'm sure that will happen. But I have mentioned it a million times. Die Laughing is probably my number one choice for because I love my friend group. Not huge on TTRPG. They're big board game people, and that's fine. But I really like to play TTRPGs. So Die Laughing is one that I will pull out when we're just hanging out, having a couple drinks, and just tell a story and laugh our asses off because that's the way that it's built, that it is set up. So yeah, I might be like, let's play time. We're getting into spooky season, so why not?
Perfect. Next, Jess. What about you?
Hey, like I said, I'm Jess. I'm Miss_Jess03 on Twitter. I'm Angry Nerd Girl on Twitch. I write and I stream games and I run games as part of Magpie's community play program. So you can sign up to play games with me. Like if you like Powered by the Apocalypse games, I'm running Apillion and Bluebeard's Bride most of the time. You can see me today in 3 hours. I'm playing on Total Party Kills channel as part of a Spelljammer one shot for charity. And then tomorrow, I think a lot of you are going to be asleep because it's at 9 p.m. Eastern time. But it's an evil campaign on Phoenix Waiki's channel where I'm playing an incredibly fat Tabaxi bard. And then on my channel, every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern, I run Three Flings, the adventures of three tieflings through the entire Uncaged series. And we've been running for almost 3 years now, and we only have 4 adventures left, so it sure has been a time.
Wonderful. Tree, why don't you go next?
Yeah, sure. I am actually not going to talk about Blades because I do that all the time. Instead, I will say that a game that I enjoy immensely as something that I read, and I ran a campaign of this, and I hated every second. But a game that I enjoyed very much reading was Spire: The City Must Fall. It's a game about playing a group of Drow revolutionaries trying to take down the evil colonialist high elf empire that is ruling that city. It's remarkable in its writing. You currently cannot really. I mean, I exist on social media, but I try not to make my game writing stuff with it as much as I can, mostly because my social media tends to be about my professional work and stuff, and I don't want that to get in the way of like me having fun. So
Of
you
course.
can put me on Discord if you like, and I'll talk to you.
Nice. I have those socials as well. Ari, tell us about what your favorite is.
Um, Hello. Yeah, I'm gonna do Heart. It's kind of a sequel to Spire, but not exactly. Uh, it's based on body horror. It's based on it's basically horror, and it has some amazing mechanics that I'm dying to try out. Uh, I also would like to tell that my Twitter is Solaria Writing, and I kind of make games sometime. I have only like posted one game so far, but like I'm working on stuff. We'll see. Um, yeah, I would also like to shout out. I mean, we already talked about it so much in the chat, but I'd like to shout out Bluebeard's Bride. It's an amazing game. It's also horror, but it has like uh, the writing and the art is so amazing. And if you want to try reading as play, try it with that game because it's so good, so good. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for having me, and thanks for the chat. It was amazing.
Both are amazing games. Next, we have Chirag.
I'm still here. Cool. Before I tell, if you want to find me, you can see me on Twitter at Chicky Said What, or you can see me on Twitch at Desis&Dragons. You were playing Play to the Anta. We might have mentioned it once or twice. Our final episode's up on Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. IST, or see it on YouTube. Same name, Desis&Dragons. As for fun games, I think Jess wanted to let everyone know that there's a very fun solo game called You Are Quarantined with Adam Driver, and he is insisting on reading you his new script. I mean, the name just sums it up. It's short, succinct.
I have to play this. Oh my
Yeah.
god. To play this game, you will need a 20-sided dice, some paper, and a strong mental image of the actor Adam Driver. This is the most amazing thing I've ever read.
Nice.
Wow.
That's fun. As for games that I really like I like all the games I said, but the one that I keep going back to that's just like really strong for me is City of Mist, where you are an ordinary person dealing with your own responsibilities, but within you is a mythology, a legend, a story that wants to tell itself, that wants to express itself in this noir kind of world. Whether that's the power of Zeus trying to do what Zeus do, whether that's but that's a modern interpretation like Spider-Man or Sweeney Todd or whatever you think it wants to be. That seeing all these mythologies and worlds kind of collide, you could just have so much fun with it. I ran a teenager game with that, where the principal was the principal and bad guy was Shakespeare, who was trying to retell all his tragedies and stories, and it's just you can do so much illusions and things, and you feel so clever, and then your players surprise you, and they're clever. It's just fun, City of Mist. It's a good time.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Season 2 when, Chirag? Season 2 when?
DM me. We'll make it happen.
Let's go.
We'll throw another car at you. It's great.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been such a pleasure having all of you here. I learned a lot. So many new games to try out. And yeah, just thanks for providing your perspective on these things. It was such an amazing time. I'd just like to shout out my favorite game, obviously Wonder Home. It's a pastoral TTRPG with vibes like a Ghibli movie with a strong focus on role playing. So if that is your jam, just message me on Discord and I'll run it for you anytime.
Nice.
Christ. I'm in
Wait a
awe.
minute. You like Wonder Home? Since when?
I never would have guessed ever.
Never.
News to all of us. Shocking developments.